The night was silent, the stars hung above like cold eyes, and the lonely colony on the edge of space slept under the thin air of a half-dead planet. A human man walked back from his late shift at the mining station, his boots heavy with dust, his body tired, and his mind lost in the thought of tomorrow's hard work. He was no hero, no soldier of legend, just a simple worker surviving far away from Earth. He always believed his life would stay the same, quiet and unimportant, until that night when everything changed. As he passed the dark edge of the forest, he heard it. A strange cry, not human, not animal, something soft yet full of pain. At first he thought it was the wind moving through broken branches, but then he heard words, "Help me, please, help me." The man stopped, his heart beating faster. He told himself not to go closer. Trouble in the wild meant death, yet his legs moved without asking. He pushed through the thick shadows of the trees, his lantern shaking in his hand, and then he saw her, an alien woman, her skin pale like silver under the moonlight, her clothes torn and dirty, her body weak and trembling. Her eyes, large and shining, looked at him with fear and hope at the same time. When she spoke, her voice broke like glass. "Please, human, I beg you, marry me or I will die." The man froze. He thought he was dreaming. What kind of madness was this? A stranger from another world begging for marriage in the middle of the night. He almost laughed, but her eyes stopped him. They were not the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone running from death. He asked with a dry voice, "Who are you? Why are you here? What do you mean, marry you?" The alien woman fell to her knees, holding his leg with weak hands. "They will come. They will find me. If I am alone, I have no right to live. But if you take me as your wife, they cannot touch me." His mind raced. He wanted to pull away, to run, but something in her voice pulled at his chest. She was desperate, her words heavy with truth and terror. He whispered, "Who will come? Who is chasing you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "They are hunters, killers. They will reach this place soon." The night suddenly felt heavier. The trees seemed to lean closer, and the man looked around as if eyes already watched from the shadows. He had never wanted trouble. He had never wanted danger. But now it stood in front of him, in the shape of a broken alien woman begging for his hand. Her body shivered as if she had no strength left, and he knew if he left her there, she would not see the sunrise. He lifted her gently, her weight light as air, and carried her out of the forest. Her voice, weak but full of hope, whispered in his ear, "Thank you, human. You are my only chance." As he walked back to his small home, questions burned in his mind. Why marriage? What law or custom gave her safety in such a strange way? Was she truly innocent, or was he being pulled into some dangerous trap? But even as doubt filled him, he looked at her face and saw not a liar, but someone who had lost everything. Her eyes closed as she rested in his arms, and he felt the faint beat of her heart against his chest. He realized he had already chosen to help her, even without knowing the price. The settlement lights appeared ahead, small and weak against the endless night. He thought of the other workers, the guards, the simple people who just wanted peace. If the hunters came, all of them would be in danger, all because of this one woman. But he could not turn back. Not now. Her words still rang in his head. "Please marry me, or I will die." Inside his small room, he placed her on the bed, gave her water, and covered her with a blanket. She looked at him with tired eyes, whispering again, "They will not stop. You must believe me, human. They will not stop until they take me." The man sat on the chair, staring at her, feeling the weight of something bigger than himself. He wanted to ask more, he wanted answers, but outside, the sound of engines echoed faintly in the night sky. Ships, landing, searching, coming closer. The hook was set, his quiet life was broken, and the alien woman had tied her fate to his. He had no idea what storm was about to fall on him, but one truth was clear. The moment he found her in the forest, his life was no longer his own. The night of silence had turned into the night of destiny, and nothing would ever be the same. The human man sat in his small room, the dim light flickering on the cracked walls, and the sound of distant engines still echoed in his mind. He kept looking at the alien woman lying on his bed, her skin pale, her breathing weak, but her eyes glowing with a strange light. He felt the weight of questions pressing down on him, yet he said nothing at first, waiting, watching, trying to understand who she truly was. After a long silence, she spoke, her voice soft, trembling, and full of sadness. "My name is Saria," she whispered. "I was born far from here, on a planet you will never see again, for it no longer exists." The man's eyes narrowed, he leaned forward. "What do you mean, no longer exists?" Saria's lips shook as she tried to form the words, her hands clutching the blanket as if it were her last piece of safety. "They destroyed it," she said, her voice breaking. My people, my home, everything burned to nothing. He felt a chill move through him. Destroyed planets were not rare in the dark history of the galaxy, but hearing it from someone who had lived it made the story heavy, real. Saria's tears fell, shining like liquid silver in the dim light. I was just a daughter, not a soldier, not a leader. I was no one important, she whispered. But when the warlords came, they took the strong, Titases. They killed the weak and they hunted the survivors. Her voice grew harsher, filled with a bitter truth. They call us property. They sell us. They use us. And they never stop hunting. I ran. I hid. But now, they are close again. The man felt anger rising, but also fear. This was more than just one woman's story. This was a storm that could fall on the whole colony. He rubbed his face with both hands, whispering, "Why come here? Why find me? Why ask me for marriage?" Saria's eyes locked onto his, desperate and burning with a strange hope. "Because of your laws," she said. "In the human colonies, if a refugee marries a citizen, she cannot be taken. The hunters know this. The Galactic Council respects this. Marriage is the only shield left to me." The man leaned back in his chair, shocked. It sounded insane, yet her voice carried no lies, no tricks, only the trembling honesty of someone with nothing left. "You ask me to risk my life, to put everyone here in danger, for you, a stranger," he said slowly. Saria sat up weakly, her body trembling, but her voice strong. "I ask you for life, not only mine, but perhaps yours too, because once they take me, they will not leave you. You have already touched my fate." He looked at her and felt the weight of her words. It was true. The moment he had carried her from the forest, he had become part of her story, whether he wanted it or not. He wanted to say no, to push her away, but he could not. Not when she sat there broken, begging, and yet still burning with a fire that refused to die. Saria lowered her head, whispering again, "I do not want to trick you. I do not ask for love. I ask for survival. Marriage in your law is a bond. In my law it is protection, but in my heart, it is the only hope I have left." Her words cut into him, not because they were sweet, but because they were raw, true, and heavy. The man felt something ring inside, a strange respect, even pity, but also fear. Suddenly a loud noise shook the room. The man rushed to the window and saw shadows of ships passing through the sky, silent hunters moving like wolves in the night. Saria stood, though her legs shook, her eyes wide with terror. "They are here," she whispered. "They will search every house, every corner. They will not rest until they find me." The man cursed under his breath, grabbing his old rifle from the wall, a weapon too weak for war but strong enough for protection. He turned back to her. "If what you say is true, then I have no time to think. They will find you, and if they do, this whole colony will burn." Saria stepped closer, her silver eyes glowing with a mix of fear and hope. "Then decide now, human. Will you let me die, or will you take me as your wife?" Her words struck him like a blade. This was no longer a story he could walk away from, no longer a dream he could forget in the morning. He stood there, breathing heavy, staring at the fragile woman before him, and he knew that whatever choice he made tonight would change his life forever. For the first time, the man saw beyond her fear, beyond her weakness, and into the strength hidden deep inside her. Saria was not only a victim, she was a survivor, carrying the ashes of a lost world in her heart. And now those ashes were in his hands, burning, demanding a choice. Outside, the engines roared louder, the hunters were landing, and the ground shook under their weight. The human man knew time was ending, and his answer would decide not only her fate, but perhaps his own. In the silence that followed, Saria's whisper filled the room again. "Please, human, please, before it is too late." The ground trembled as the first hunter ship landed beyond the ridge, its engines growling like a beast, its lights cutting through the night like knives. The human man stood at the window, his old rifle clutched tightly. His breath sharp, his heart racing. Beside him, Saria pressed her trembling hands to the wall, her silver eyes wide with terror, yet behind the fear burned something fierce, something wild. "They are here," she whispered, her voice shaking but clear. "They will search until they find me. They never stop. They never forgive." The man swallowed hard, looking out at the shadows moving under the bright beams, tall armored figures stepping from the ships, their weapons glowing, their helmets black like stone, hunters, ruthless and cold, killers who followed trails of blood across the galaxy. He had heard stories of them, but stories never carried the sound of their boots striking the ground or the echo of their machines waking the night. Now the stories were real. Now the nightmare was walking only meters from his door. Saria grabbed his arm, her touch light but desperate. If they find me, they will kill you too. Do you understand? They will kill anyone who hides me." The man felt the weight of her words pressed down on his chest. His simple life of mining and work was gone. Now he stood in the center of danger he never asked for, but something inside him refused to let her go, refused to hand her over. The colony outside began to stir, doors opening, frightened faces looking out, whispers rising like smoke. People saw the ships, saw the hunters, and fear spread fast. The man could hear voices calling, questions filling the night. Who are they? What do they want? Why are they here? No one answered. But the truth was inside his house, resting on his bed, hiding behind his walls. One of the hunters raised a loudspeaker. His voice thundered across the settlement, cold and commanding. "We seek one fugitive, an alien female. Surrender her, and we will leave in peace. Refuse, and you all suffer." The man's hands shook. He looked at Saria, her face pale, her body frozen. She whispered, "They lie. They never leave in peace. Once they enter, they destroy. Please believe me." The man closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather strength, trying to breathe, but the roar of the hunters left no space for calm. He looked back at Saria, whispering, "If I protect you, the colony burns. If I give you up, you die. And I cannot do that." Saria's eyes filled with tears, but there was no time for words. The sound of metal fists knocking at the first doors echoed through the air. The hunters searched house after house, their heavy boots striking like drums, their lights sweeping across faces, their weapons ready. Screams rose in the distance when someone resisted, the air filled with smoke and fear. The man knew it was only moments before they reached his home. He checked his rifle, though he knew it was useless against their armor, but holding it gave him strength. Saria moved closer, whispering fast, "We must hide. Not here. They will come here first. They always start from the edges. We must move into the forest, deeper, away from their scanners." The man hesitated. His home was his only safety, but her voice was sharp, filled with experience. She had been hunted before. She knew their ways, and he realized his choice was simple. Trust her, or lose everything. He nodded, quickly grabbing a small bag, food, and extra rounds, though he doubted they would help. Saria's hands shook as she pulled the blanket tighter around herself, hiding her alien features, her silver skin, her glowing eyes. They slipped out through the back, moving silently into the cold night. Behind them, the hunters drew closer, their lights sweeping, their scanners humming, their voices barking orders. The man led her through narrow paths, behind old machinery, across broken fences, into the dark edge of the forest. Every step felt heavy, every breath loud. Saria clung to his arm, whispering, "Faster, they will track us. They smell fear, they taste it. We must not stop." As they reached the deeper woods, the sky lit up with sudden fire, one of the colony houses burning, the screams of people rising. The man turned, his eyes wide, anger filling his chest. But Saria pulled him forward. "You cannot help them now. If you stop, they will catch us. You must live first. Only then can you fight." Her words cut him, but they were true. The hunters spread out, their machines crawling like insects across the ground, scanning, searching. The man and Saria hid under thick roots of an old tree, their bodies pressed close, their breaths held. Above them, the shadows of hunters passed, lights slicing through the trees, voices calling in their strange tongue. The man's heart pounded like a drum, sweat ran down his face, his finger tight on the trigger of his rifle. Saria's hand pressed against his chest, whispering so soft it was almost air. "Do not move. Do not breathe. They are close." One of the hunters stopped only a few steps away, his armored head turning slowly, his scanner glowing red. The man thought it was over, his breath caught, his muscles tight. But then the hunter turned away, following another voice, and the danger passed. Only then did Saria and the man breathe again, their relief heavy, but brief. The night stretched long, filled with engines, fire, and voices. The hunters would not stop, not until they found her, and the man knew this was only the beginning. He looked at Saria, her face lit by the faint glow of the burning colony behind them, her eyes shining with both sorrow and steel. She whispered, "Now you see, human. Now you understand. They will not rest, and neither can we." And in that moment, the man realized his life had truly changed. No longer just a miner, no longer just a survivor, he was now a protector, and the hunters had marked him too. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. The forest was dark and endless, the ground cold under their tired feet, the cries of the hunters still echoing far behind. The human man held his old rifle close, his eyes scanning every shadow, while Saria walked beside him, her body weak but her spirit burning. They had escaped the colony for now, but he knew it would not last. The hunters never stopped. They would search until they found her, and now him too. They reached an old cave hidden between jagged rocks, its mouth black like an open wound in the hillside. The man pushed aside the branches and guided Saria inside, the air damp and heavy, the silence deep. He set down his bag, lit a small lantern, and for the first time since the night began, they could breathe without moving. Saria sat on the stone floor, her silver skin faintly glowing in the lantern light, her eyes staring into the dark as if haunted by ghosts. The man leaned against the wall, watching her, questions burning inside him. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Why me? Why marriage? Why does a piece of human law matter to hunters who kill without mercy?" Saria looked at him, her eyes wet with tears but steady. "Because law is the only thing they fear," she whispered. "The hunters kill, yes, but they kill for those above them. They follow masters, warlords, and councils, and even they must obey certain rules. If I am your wife, they cannot touch me without breaking the treaty with humans, and if they break it, they risk war." The man shook his head, struggling to believe. "You are asking me to tie my life to yours, a stranger, just so you can use me as a shield." Saria's face fell, but she did not look away, her voice strong even through her pain. "Yes, I ask it, I do not hide it. I beg for survival, not for love, not for comfort, but for life. If you refuse, I will die. If you accept, you may save not only me, but maybe even yourself, because the hunters will see you as my protector, and they will not dare kill you unless their masters order it." The words cut deep. The man wanted to walk away, to say no, but he remembered her lying in the forest, broken and desperate, whispering that plea. He thought of the colony burning, of the screams carried by the night wind, of the families hiding while the hunters searched. If he gave her up, would it even stop the killing, or would they burn everything anyway? Saria crawled closer, her weak hands clutching his arm, her voice shaking. "Please, human, I have no pride left. I beg you, marry me. Let the law protect me. Protect us both. You lose nothing, you gain nothing, but you save a life." The man looked down at her, her silver skin glowing in the lantern, her face filled with sorrow, her voice heavy with truth. She was not lying. He could feel it. She had lost everything, and now she offered him her last piece of hope. But still he hesitated. "Marriage is not nothing," he said slowly. "It is a bond, even if only in words. It ties us, it changes everything." Saria lowered her head, whispering, "I know, but I will accept whatever you give me, even if it is only a bond of survival. For me, it is enough." Silence filled the cave, the sound of dripping water echoing through the dark. The man felt the weight of choice pressing down, heavy as stone. Outside the hunters marched, their voices sharp, their scanners glowing red in the distance, closer with every minute. He knew time was running out. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "If I say yes, if I take you as my wife, then I am no longer just a minor, no longer free. I will be hunted with you. I will share your enemies." Saria lifted her head, her eyes shining with tears. "Yes, human, you will share my fate, but you will also share my shield." The man closed his eyes, and in the silence of that cave he felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. He opened his eyes and looked at her, seeing not just a frightened woman, but a survivor who carried the ashes of a lost world. Slowly he reached out his hand, his voice low. "Then I accept. I will take you as my wife, not for love, not for desire, but for life, yours and mine." Saria gasped, her hands clutching his as if he had given her the universe, tears falling freely down her silver cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You do not know what you have done for me, but I will never forget it." In that moment, even in the dark cave, even with hunters closing in, a strange bond formed between them, fragile but real, not love, not yet, but something that could grow, something born from survival, from shared danger. The man felt it, though he tried to ignore it, a spark in his chest. Outside, the sound of heavy boots grew louder, the hunters sweeping closer, their scanners flashing. The man tightened his grip on his rifle, his voice sharp. "Then wife or not, we must move. They will find this place soon." Saria nodded, wiping her tears, her face now strong, determined. "Yes, husband, let us survive together." And as they stepped out of the cave into the shadow of the trees, the hunters moved closer, their lights cutting through the night, their voices cold. The deal had been made, the bond had been spoken, and now the galaxy itself would be forced to recognize it. The chase was far from over, but now they faced it together. The forest no longer felt safe. Every tree seemed to hide an enemy. Every shadow seemed alive. The human man held his rifle close, guiding Saria through the uneven ground, his ears sharp, his heart heavy. Behind them, the hunters spread out, their machines crawling over rocks, their scanners flashing red through the dark. their voices calling in a language of steel. The chase had begun, and there was no time left for rest. Saria stumbled, her legs weak, but the man caught her arm, pulling her forward. "You must keep moving," he whispered, his voice firm but not unkind. "If you fall now, they will take us both." Her silver eyes burned with exhaustion but also determination. "I will not fall, not while you stand with me." Suddenly a beam of light sliced through the trees, a hunter ship hovering above the forest, its engines shaking the ground. The man dragged Saria behind a fallen log as the light swept over them. The air hummed with energy, a sharp sound rising as the scanners activated. Saria pressed her hands against the earth, whispering, "Do not move, do not breathe. They are searching for my pulse, for my heat." The man held his breath, his heart pounding so loud he thought the hunters would hear it. The beam lingered, then passed and the ship moved on. Saria exhaled slowly, her body shaking. That was too close. They crawled deeper into the forest, but the hunters were not far. One of them stepped into view, tall and armored, its weapon glowing blue, its steps heavy. The man raised his rifle, though he knew it was useless against such armor. The hunter turned, scanning the air, and for a moment its red visor pointed straight at them. Saria whispered quickly, "Leave it to me." Her hand lifted, glowing faintly, and the air shimmered with strange light. The hunter froze, its scanner blinking wildly, as if confused, then it turned away, walking in the opposite direction. The man stared at her in shock. "What did you just do?" Saria lowered her hand, sweat running down her face, her voice weak. "A small trick of my people, a way to bend their machines, but it will not last long. I cannot do it many times." The man nodded, pulling her along, though his mind raced with quest. She was not just a refugee, not just a victim. There was power inside her, power that the hunters wanted to erase, and now that power was bound to him, tied by the deal they had made. They ran through the night, jumping across streams, climbing rocks, every sound of pursuit growing louder. The hunters fired into the trees, blue light burning the branches, explosions shaking the ground. The man pushed Saria ahead, shouting, "Go, faster, do not stop!" A blast hit nearby, throwing them both to the ground, dirt flying. The man rolled, lifting his rifle and fired back, the shots useless against armor but loud enough to draw attention. The hunters turned, their weapons ready, but Saria grabbed his hand, pulling him to his feet. "Not here. We cannot fight them. We must escape." They ran again, their bodies burning with exhaustion, their lungs on fire, but the will to survive drove them. At last they reached a broken ruin, an old human outpost long abandoned, its walls crumbling, its roof fallen. The man pulled her inside, hiding behind thick stone, his chest heaving. Saria leaned against the wall, her face pale, her breath sharp. "They are too many," she whispered. "We cannot outrun them forever." The man looked at her, his voice rough. "Then we fight together, or we die here." Saria's eyes glowed, a tear falling down her cheek, but her voice steady. "If we fight as one, husband and wife, bound not only by law but by choice. If death comes, let it find us together." The hunters closed in, their shadows falling over the ruins, their weapons glowing. The man tightened his grip on his rifle, his finger ready. Saria lifted her hands again, light forming between her fingers. Strange and beautiful, the air shimmered, the ground trembled, and for the first time the man saw the true strength hidden inside her. The hunters entered, their visors glowing red, their voices sharp. The man fired, his shots echoing, sparks flying from their armor. Saria's light burst forward, bending the air, twisting the scanners, throwing the hunters into confusion. For a moment, the impossible happened. The hunters staggered, blinded, their machines broken by her power. The man grabbed her hand, pulling her through a gap in the wall. Together they ran once more into the deeper woods, the night swallowing them. Behind them the hunters roared, their voices filled with fury. The chase was not over, not even close, but the man and Saria were still alive, bound by their deal, bound by survival, bound by something that was slowly becoming more than either of them had expected. The forest stretched ahead, dangerous and unknown, but it was still freedom, and as long as they kept running together, there was still hope. The night stretched long, and the forest seemed endless, but the hunters never gave up. Their ships circled above like vultures, their scanners flashing red through the trees, their heavy steps pounding the ground. The man and Saria ran until their bodies shook, hiding when they could, fighting when they must. Yet the hunters always closed in. Every breath became harder, every step heavier, but giving up was not an option. At dawn, the sky glowed faintly, and the man guided Saria into a canyon where sharp rocks rose like broken teeth. They climbed down, slipping between the stones, hoping the narrow walls would shield them from the eyes of the ships. But the hunters were clever. Their machines tracked heat and movement, and by midday the sound of engines filled the air above the canyon. Saria's eyes darkened with fear, her voice breaking. "They will find us here. There is no escape this time." The man pressed her shoulder firmly, his own face grim. "Then we stand, we make them stop, one way or another." But she shook her head, her silver skin pale in the sunlight. "You do not understand, human. They do not want to kill me quickly. They want to make me vanish, to erase my name. But if we are married in truth by your own plea, then even their masters will hesitate. They will not dare touch me without breaking the treaty." Her words struck deep. Yes, he had spoken the vow in the cave. He had accepted her as wife to shield her, but it had been only words whispered in darkness. No witness, no proof, nothing that could bind the hunters in the eyes of law. Now, with the canyon echoing with the roar of approaching engines, she looked at him with eyes full of fire and tears. "Do it now," she whispered. "Bind me in your way. Speak it where the galaxy can hear. Let the hunters know that I am not a fugitive, but a wife, yours." The man's chest tightened, the weight of the moment pressing on him like stone. Marriage had never been part of his dreams. He had wanted a simple life, work, food, sleep, nothing more. But here, in the jaws of death, the choice became clear. If he refused, she would be taken, and he would die beside her. If he accepted, everything in his life would change, but she would live, and maybe so would he. The hunters' voices echoed down the canyon walls, their armored feet striking closer, the sound like drums of doom. Saria knelt before him, her hands trembling, her voice shaking. "Please, human, I give myself to your law, to your bond, to whatever you choose, but do it now before they arrive." The man looked at her, her silver skin glowing faintly in the sun, her hair tangled, her body broken from running, but her spirit unbroken. He realized then that she was not only asking for protection, she was giving him her last piece of hope, her last piece of trust. His throat tightened, his eyes burned, and in a voice strong enough to echo across the rocks, he spoke. "By my word, by my choice, I take you, Saria, as my wife, not in secret, not in shadow, but here, before the stars, before the galaxy itself. From this moment, your life is tied to mine." The canyon seemed to hold its breath, the sound of the vow lingering in the air. Saria's eyes widened, tears streaming down her chest. "Eeks," her voice breaking as she whispered, "Then I am yours and you are mine, bound not by fear alone, but by truth." At that moment the hunters arrived, their armored forms filling the canyon mouth, their weapons glowing blue. One of them raised his loudspeaker, his voice thundered, "Surrender the fugitive, or all will be destroyed." The man stepped forward, rifle in hand, his body straight, his voice clear. "She is no fugitive. She is my wife, under human law, under the treaty your masters signed. You cannot touch her." The hunters froze, their red visors flashing as their machines processed his words. They scanned Saria, their data confirming the bond spoken aloud, the vow binding under human law. For a long moment silence filled the canyon, only the wind moving through the stones. Then the leader lowered his weapon, his voice colder than ice. "The law protects her, but it does not protect you, human, from what follows." Saria gripped the man's hand, her body shaking but her voice steady. "They will leave now, but they will not stop. They will return, stronger, and they will test this bond again." The man looked at her, his heart heavy yet burning with strange strength. "Then let them come, for now we live, and as long as we live, we fight." The hunters turned, their boots striking the stone, their ships rising into the sky, their voices bitter with defeat. The canyon fell quiet once more, but the silence was not peace, it was only a pause. Saria leaned against him, her tears falling, her whisper soft. "You have saved me, but you have also chained yourself to my fate, and I do not know if I should thank you or beg your forgiveness." The man held her hand, looking out at the empty sky where the ships had vanished. "Do not thank me. Do not ask forgiveness. What is done. From now on we stand together." And in the canyon where death had nearly claimed them, a choice had been made, a vow had been spoken, a bond sealed, and the galaxy itself had heard it. But even as hope stirred in their hearts, shadows still moved beyond the horizon. The hunters had not given up, the warlords would not forgive, and the true storm was still coming. The canyon lay silent after the hunters departed. Only the wind moved between the broken stones, carrying with it the faint echo of engines fading into the sky. The man lowered his rifle slowly, his hands still shaking, his body heavy with exhaustion. Beside him Saria stood weak but unbroken, her silver eyes glowing with tears and quiet strength. They were alive, they were bound, and for the first time since the night began, a small flame of hope burned between them. They found shelter again at the edge of the canyon, a hollow space under a stone ledge where the sun cast long shadows. The man dropped his bag, sat against the wall, and closed his eyes, his breath heavy. Saria sat near him, her body trembling from the strain of her powers and the weight of what had just happened. For a long while neither spoke, silence filling the space like a heavy blanket. At last Saria whispered, her voice soft but clear. "When I begged you, it was only for survival. I thought of nothing else. I thought only of the law that could save me, not of you, not of what it would mean." The man opened his eyes, turning his head toward her, his face unreadable. She looked down, her hands folded tightly, her silver skin catching the fading light. "But when you carried me from the forest, when you stood with me against death, when you spoke the vow in front of the stars, something changed in me." Her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "I begged you to marry me only to live, but now I want more than life. I want the bond to be true, not just a shield, not just a law, but real." The man stared at her, his chest heavy, his mind struggling to understand the storm of emotions inside him. He had seen her broken. He had seen her powerful. He had seen her afraid and yet unyielding. Now he saw her vulnerable in another way, opening her heart, risking more than even her life. He did not speak at once, his throat dry, his hands clenched. For years he had been alone, working, eating, sleeping, never daring to dream of family, never daring to believe love was meant for him. Now a woman from the stars, hunted and scarred, stood before him offering more than survival, offering her heart. The silence stretched, and Saria lowered her head as if preparing for rejection. Finally the man's voice broke the stillness, rough but steady. "When you asked me, I thought you were a burden. I thought you would bring only danger, and maybe you have, but you also brought something else." Saria lifted her head, her eyes wide, her breath caught. "You brought meaning," he whispered. "I no longer run only for myself. I no longer fight only to survive. I fight for you, and maybe that is enough to call love." Her tears fell freely then, shining like silver drops on the stone, and she moved closer, her trembling hand resting on his, in the shadows of the canyon, with the sun sinking behind the cliffs. They sat together, two souls bound by law but now tied by choice. Not lovers by chance, not strangers by force, but partners who had chosen to face the galaxy side by side. Yet peace did not last. As night fell again, the sky above the canyon glowed faintly with distant lights, not the small glow of stars, but the sharp glimmer of ships moving in the black. Saria noticed first, her body tensing, her voice trembling. "They are not gone. They only wait. The hunters may step back, but the masters will not forgive. They will come again, stronger, and they will test us both." The man looked at the distant lights, his jaw tight, his heart steady. "Then let them come," he said. "We are no longer alone, and if war comes, we will face it together." Saria leaned against him, her eyes closing for the first time in days, her voice soft as a whisper of wind. "Together." The canyon grew quiet once more, but in the silence was no despair, only a fragile hope. They had survived the night. They had defied the hunters. They had made a vow before the stars. And though greater dangers waited beyond the horizon, something stronger than fear had been born, a bond that could not be broken, a love that had grown from survival, and a promise that echoed in both their hearts. In the darkness the man held his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the sky. In his arms Saria rested, her breath steady, her tears dry at last. The galaxy was vast, the enemies endless, but as long as they walked together, there was a path forward. A poor alien woman had begged a human man to marry her, and now, through fire and fear, that marriage had become more than law, it had become destiny.